Meet Jeannie. Jeannie is a bright young girl in her first year of university. Tonight, Jeannie is attending a social hosted at the local pub for students in her program. While she is excited to drink for the first time, she is a little wary. Are there long-term effects from binge drinking? What is the likelihood of developing an addiction? What exactly is an addiction? To understand why people drink and take drugs, we must first journey back to a time when staying alive was a challenge. Unbeknownst to our prehistoric cousins, their everyday survival depended on the actions of a brain system scientists now call the mesocorticolimbic dopamine reward pathway. Found deep within the center of the brain, this pathway is activated when we encounter new stimuli that are important for our survival. The end result is a feeling of enhanced well-being. For our ancient ancestors, this meant that venturing out into dangerous territory to find a source of food or a sexual mate would lead to a release of dopamine, making our caveman here feel very, very good. The experience of the rewarding stimulus would be encoded into regions of the brain involved in memory and planning, ensuring that our ancestors would continue to actively feed and procreate, despite the many lurking perils of the time. Drugs of abuse, like alcohol, cocaine, or marijuana, work by exploiting the same pathway that has helped humans to learn and survive for generations. All addictive drugs, either directly or indirectly, modulate dopamine signaling in this pathway. Importantly, not everyone who uses these drugs becomes addicted. However, for some individuals, a first-time experience can turn into a lifelong addiction. When an individual tries a drug for the first time, he or she initially experiences a sense of euphoria, unlike that of any natural reward, such as food or sex. Often, the feeling of intoxication drives a user to take more of the drug. This behavior is representative of the first stage of addiction, binge and intoxication. During the first stage, the drug targets a region of the midbrain known as the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and causes the release of dopamine into a tiny structure known as the nucleus accumbens. Endorphins, our body's primary natural opioid, is also released. It is believed that the combined activation of both dopamine and endorphins is what underlies the sensation of pleasure following drug use. Other brain regions are also activated in the initial phases of drug use. The globus pallidus, part of the basal ganglia, is associated with the formation of habits and automatic behaviors. During this stage, drugs of abuse prompt the globus pallidus to encode drug-related behaviors as habits. The prefrontal cortex, or PFC, is a region responsible for executive functions like planning and decision-making. Normally, the PFC inhibits lower brain regions such as the nucleus accumbens. However, drugs of abuse weaken this control, thus disinhibiting the nucleus accumbens. This is thought to underlie the impulsivity that is characteristic of the binge and intoxication stage. A different subset of neural structures is implicated in the second stage of the addiction cycle, the withdrawal and negative affect stage. Because drug use increases dopamine levels beyond what is normal, chronic use leads to a number of compensatory responses. The net result is that when the user is not high, the dopamine signal is actually lower than normal, leaving the user feeling awful and unhappy. The neural systems underlying this negative affective state includes a group of midbrain structures known as the extended amygdala. The activation of these systems leads to the production of stress hormones. Eventually, consuming the drug no longer produces pleasure, but instead is now used in an effort to stave off highly unpleasant psychological and physiological symptoms of withdrawal. Drug use has become a deep, compulsive need, rather than a pleasurable, impulsive desire. The final stage of the addiction cycle is the anticipation and craving stage, which often marks the point whereby an individual's chronic drug use may lead to the development of a substance use disorder. While this phase is commonly represented as craving, it is important to note that craving does not by itself lead to the relapse that begins another cycle. This final stage is characterized by a complete loss of prefrontal control, as continued drug use compromises frontal lobe structures critical for evaluation, judgment, and decision-making. This stage is also characterized by altered glutamatergic signaling. Glutamate plays a critical role in memory formation and consolidation, as well as behavioral initiation. During the anticipation and craving stage, the large waves of dopamine received by the prefrontal cortex during drug use prompt the reciprocal release of glutamate in the midbrain, committing the drug and the experience to memory. As the plasticity of the brain is continuously shaped and reshaped by the drug, new paths become cemented as drug-related contextual information is stored by the hippocampus, and activation of the basolateral amygdala leads to conditioned responses to highly specific drug-related cues. In this way, chronic substance use can be thought of as a maladaptive form of learning, whereby the drug has capitalized on the plastic nature of the brain. Extended drug use leads to the exploitation and rearrangement of neural circuitry, instilling memories, habits, and goals that place greater importance on drug use than on natural rewards. And what about Jeannie? It's difficult to say whether addiction is a foregone conclusion for her. However, now that she has the knowledge, she feels emboldened to make safer decisions about her own drug use.